I'm Ellis Martin. Join me now for a conversation with the President and Chief Science Officer of Zhittya Genesis Medicine, Dr. Jack Jacobs. Strokes, heart attacks, diabetes, Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's, multiple sclerosis, brain injuries. These are just some of the major afflictions that have affected someone that we know or have known, people close to us. It's inescapable in this thing that we call life. Most often we lose these family members or friends. And again, many of them survive to live out a slow death or debilitation. Quoting from the company's website, zgm.care, Zhittya Genesis Medicine's drug development has led them to a possible treatment for those diseases and more, growing new blood vessels in the human body, a process referred to as angiogenesis. FGF-1 is a potent growth factor with just that ability. By growing new blood vessels in the human body, Zhittya believes that FGF-1 could reverse the root causes of those diseases. Jack, welcome back to the program.
Good to be back, Ellis.
I was talking with your CEO, Dan Montano, last week, and we didn't cover it in our interview, but I understand that you've been an advocate for using the FGF-1 drug that Zhittya produces for depression. Please explain how that works.
Okay, be happy to. Yes, I think for over 20 years now, our drug, which is the FGF-1, is in the literature. There's tens of papers that talk about its role in chronic depression. So depression is probably the most prevalent and life-threatening form of mental illness we have. Over 20% of people in the world are depressed, and even in the United States, we have about 20 million people that suffer from depression in the U.S. I'd say about 2 million of those, 10%, suffer from a very severe form of chronic depression. It's called a major depressive disorder. And there's lots of data in the literature that FGF-1, our drug, is severely depressed in the brains of those people with chronic depression. So I started looking around just recently at some more recent papers, and remarkably, with these more powerful imaging systems, what's called functional MRI, you can actually look at blood flow in the brain and look in very discrete areas. And when those studies look at people with major depression or chronic depression, it's remarkable. There's a significant decrease in blood flow in those areas of the brain that are known to affect emotion, mood, areas in front of the brain called the prefrontal cortex, the hippocampus. These are all areas that are well known to be involved in depression. So our thinking is that there's lack of blood flow, a lack of capillaries, which they see in these areas. Our drug, we know, can stimulate that. In animal models of stroke, animal models of Parkinson's disease, we see an increase of blood flow in the areas that are affected in those diseases. So why not try it in chronic depression? These people who have chronic depression sometimes benefit from anti-depressive medications or behavioral therapy, but invariably they relapse and fall back into chronic depression, which severely affects their professional lives, their social lives, their personal lives. So our feeling is, why not give it a shot in a small proof of concept trial? And so we're going to move ahead, hopefully sometime later this year, and submit something to regulatory agencies in the U.S. and perhaps other countries to try a pilot study in patients with chronic depression.
So really it's a matter of blood flow in the brain that can contribute to chronic depression, even hereditary issues?
No one's quite sure what causes chronic depression. People who are under stress often get depressed. And when you look in the brains of stressed individuals, you see lack of blood flow, lack of smaller capillaries in those areas that are affected by chronic depression. And you also see less FGF-1. So we know the brain is the biggest source of FGF-1. It's there in highest quantity, so it must be doing something. And if it's down in chronic depression, that's probably not natural. So we hope by boosting the levels of FGF-1 in the brain that this could lead to perhaps increased blood flow by stimulating new capillary growth, which is called angiogenesis. And that, again, we know is coupled in the brain to the growth of new neurons. So perhaps new neuronal growth in the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex may be involved in reversing these symptoms of chronic depression. We can't guarantee that, but certainly if we don't look, we're not going to find out.
I think I know the answer, but how does this technology differ from standard antidepressants?
Antidepressants mainly are small molecules that can affect what are called neurotransmitters, so it kind of affect the chemical balance in the brain, which is known in chronic depression to be off. For example, the molecule serotonin is involved in mood and depression, so regulating the amounts of that small molecule can affect mood and emotion.
Would this be a lifelong treatment? In other words, would you be required to take the drug on a regular basis for the rest of your life, or would it be like other applications? I imagine perhaps a 6-week or a 2-month type of treatment, and then you're good to go. Do we know?
We would be testing that in our clinical trials. I think we would look first at a 6-week treatment and then see how the patients do. You're correct. In other areas where we've treated humans with this product, we get a response that is durable. We grow new blood vessels in the heart of patients that have coronary artery disease. Those vessels stay working for years. So be hoping for a similar response in patients with these brain disorders such as chronic depression. But again, that's what we would learn in conducting these clinical trials.
Can I ask you what drew you to this particular aspect of FGF-1? Why depression? Why has this become sort of a passion of yours, from what I understand?
We've been given the green light to test our drug in Parkinson's disease, and we're going to move ahead with that study in Mexico. And just looking into Parkinson's disease, 40% of people with Parkinson's disease have chronic depression. So it's something which is called a comorbidity or co-presenter. And we've noticed in some preliminary studies we've done with our heart patients who also present with, about 30% of them present with chronic depression. They were reporting they felt better, that after taking the drug, not only were we seeing changes in the vasculature in their heart, but they were reporting, not all of them, but some of them, improved mood. So we think there's something there. We don't know for sure, but if we could decrease chronic depression in Parkinson's patients, in patients with diabetes, heart disease, that would be a very useful use of our drug. We're going to be looking at that in our ongoing clinical trials and all our applications, whether it be Parkinson's disease, heart disease. We're going to have markers of mood, emotion, depression in all of those trials. So we're going to have a lot of readouts coming up in our future clinical trials, not only in chronic depression, but in these other diseases where chronic depression often co-presents.
Jack, you and Dan are often on the road presenting the story to potential investors, to potential patients, to potential friends of patients. When is your next trip?
We are heading out to New York City in about a week. We're going to be there for 3 days in Brooklyn, talking at a investors meeting, and then we're heading down to Florida, to West Palm Beach. There's another show there called The Money Show, but we're giving also some Parkinson's disease presentations, around that investment conference. So we'll be talking to support groups. And we're going to be talking about not only the potential for a treatment for Parkinson's disease, but also talk about this newer finding of chronic depression. Because again, 40% of people with Parkinson's have this depression. So we'll be spreading the word, and we're getting a lot of good feedback. We have people sign up at our website to look at the clinical trials that we're going to be doing. There's been a lot of interest in this new white paper we put out on chronic depression.
Well, Jack, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. I look forward to further chats in the future. And thank you for taking the time to discuss something as prevalent in our society and our world. 1 in 5 people, according to what you just said, have chronic depression. Thanks again.
Yeah. No, happy to talk to you, Ellis. You have a good day.
I've been speaking with Dr. Jack Jacobs, the President and Chief Science Officer of Zhittya Genesis Medicine. Find Zhittya on the web at zgm.care. That's zgm.care. I'm Ellis Martin.
Subscribe to the Ellis Martin newsletter. It's free. Go to ellismartinreport.com and fill out the quick and easy pop-up form.